Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Wednesday version of Harmonize to Energize. My name is Terry Matthews. I'm working remotely on behalf of Jin Shin Jyutsu. And the Wednesday version is an opportunity for practitioners or instructors from around the globe to share inspiring stories where they have either received Jin Shin Jyutsu or practiced Jin Shin Jyutsu on somebody or an animal or maybe even a plant. And they've had some interesting, inspiring results. And they're able to offer you some of those stories on this platform and maybe some practices to help you the way they were helped when they were experiencing that. So welcome everybody, and welcome in particular new people. Warm welcome to you. Jin Shin Jyutsu is an art of harmonizing energy in the body. Sometimes this energy is referred to as chi or ki, spelt sometimes with a K and sometimes with a Q. Basically, we understand that energy works through pathways left and right of the spine, and we can adjust how well that energy is transported through channels by placing our hands left and right on what we call safety energy locks and what acupuncturists may call points. When we place our hands on these energy locks, 2 at a time usually, we can begin the process of moving blockages from our soul, heart, mind, and body. So without further ado, it is my great honor and pleasure to present, or to say, who is today's mystery presenter. Today's mystery presenter is yes! It's Jennifer Bradley from Kentucky. Welcome, Jennifer. Welcome.
Can you see me?
Yeah. Can you see me?
Oh, good. I can see you. I can't see myself. Hi, everybody. Here I am. I have to do a little shout out because I'm looking at the chat and I see Bill. Hey, Bill from Davis, California. I am a UC Davis graduate, but we're talking a few years back in 1980. So greetings to Davis, California. And hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. And thank you, Terry, for this invitation to be here with, people who've been practitioners for a long time, people who are new, and I hope there's a lot of people who come in who are new to the art. I'm here to get you enthused about what you do, excited about, the way we're all moving forward, and to share some stories about my background.
Wonderful.
So what do you want me to do? Just start right in?
Yeah, just fire away.
Okay. So I came to Jin Shin Jyutsu back in 2003. And the way I got here, everybody kind of falls into this art in one way or another. Through a friend, through meeting someone on an airplane, we know a lot of those stories. But mine came through a family member who was experiencing cancer in California. And she was treated in the area where Jill Pasquinelli lives with UCSF, and her oncologist had a Jin Shin Jyutsu practitioner as part of the office practice where people could get sessions at no charge. They kind of had an option between Jin Shin Jyutsu or acupuncture. My sister, not crazy about needles. So she decided to give this thing a try that I'd never heard of. But so I'm out here in Kentucky. I live in Lexington, Kentucky now for many years. And as my sister was going through treatment, my mother would call and talk about taking her to this office to have this Jin Shin Jyutsu session, generally about 3 days after chemo. And she would crawl her way in. She was having high dose chemo. She had had a mastectomy. She had some lymph involvement. I don't know if any of you are involved with the cancer aspect with Jin Shin Jyutsu, but I've been for many years. So I know a lot of this, but I didn't back then. But my mom would talk about how she would drop my sister off And an hour later, she would be waiting and she would come out and she could see a significant difference in her. She seemed happier. She had an appetite. She didn't feel nauseous anymore. She wanted to take a walk. You know, these things that are so basic to us. But if you're going through chemotherapy and you've had a very rigorous surgery, it's tough going. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And at the same time, I was a caregiver for my mother-in-law through cancer, and she was experiencing lung cancer and with a metastasis to the brain. So this is really tough. She'd had one brain surgery, she'd had part of a lung removed at Sloan Kettering because we couldn't find someone here in Kentucky who could do what she needed. Chemo, all the rest. So similar story to my sister's, but she had, her cancer was more progressed. And we were getting ready to do a second brain tumor operation at Sloan Kettering. And I had this inner feeling that if we didn't do something, she was going to die. And interesting enough, talking to her later, she had the same thought. But so I thought, well, maybe this thing, whatever it is that my sister is doing, maybe I can find someone here in Kentucky. Now, this is 2003, and if you were Googling Jin Shin Jyutsu on the web, it's not like it is now where thousands and thousands of pages and information come up. I put in Jin Shin Jyutsu as best I could spell it, Kentucky, sort of said a little prayer, pushed the button, and all that came up was this little spreadsheet. So it was an Excel sheet. It had some names and numbers on it. And one of them was a practitioner in Louisville. And there's quite a group of practitioners in the Louisville area. This was Cheryl Williams. And she's still my dear friend, and she is the practitioner I go to twice a month. My mother-in-law agreed to see her. Cheryl had an opening. I drove her down from Lexington to Louisville and had no idea what to expect. You know, she took her shoes off, laid on a table in her office, and I sat nearby. She allowed me to observe. I got extremely dozy and relaxed. My mother-in-law went very deeply out, and I just watched this woman put her hands on my mother-in-law, just very lightly and very quietly. And when she got off the table, she looked completely different, just like my sister. And this was very surprising to both of us. So she began having sessions and feeling better. We went through the brain surgery. She went through it well. And then she continued to do Jin Shin Jyutsu while she was recovering from the brain tumor. The doctors wanted her to continue some whole brain radiation and do some other things and maybe some other chemo. But my mother-in-law decided that she was done with all of that. Really, truly, I think she was knowing that her life was coming to a close, whether because of cancer or not. So she declined any further treatment. The doctors were very, very upset, and they gave her a very short lifespan of, I think, about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, and they described a horrendous death from a brain tumor because they hadn't gotten everything. It was probably going to come back. And my mother-in-law was a very sophisticated kind of Hollywood woman, and she picked up her little handbag and looked at all the doctors after they gave their prognosis to her and said, "I'm sorry, darlings, this doesn't apply to me." And she walked out. And there I was with all these doctors. So, we just left. My mother-in-law decided not to do any further traditional Western treatment. And all we did was Jin Shin Jyutsu. So, and then I learned a little bit of caregiver Jin Shin Jyutsu for her, but very small amount. She would get head pain, and we were a part of hospice, so that was helpful. And she was using medical treatment for pain control, things like that, and some anxiety. No one back then talked about the world of anxiety, of these complicated illnesses. All I knew how to do that Cheryl told me was if my mother-in-law's head began to hurt, I would use my thumbs and hold her big toes. That was all I knew how to do. And I just decided that's what she tells me, that's what I'm going to do. And I was able to help relieve the pain in her head without having any Jin Shin Jyutsu experience, knowledge, training, up until the day before she died. And that day, I held, and she would do when I would hold her big toes, she would lay there and then she'd say, that's enough, that's enough, that's enough. She could feel the energy so much. She knew how much she needed. But that last day, this wouldn't help. So we went into the hospital, which happens a lot. I found out later with cancer patients, they go in for pain management, reset the pain meds, get things kind of evened out again, and then people go home. That's what we were expecting. And through this time, my mother-in-law actually was living alone. She wouldn't live with us. She had her own beautiful apartment. She'd come back and forth. She was independent. She ran a horse show. She saw all her friends. She was very active. So, we were thinking we were getting pain management and heading back out, because in other ways, she was actually in good condition. There was no metastasis to the lungs anymore. There was just this issue happening in the head. So took her to the hospital, spent the night with her, and she would wake up and say, I've got to go, as they do in Hollywood. And I thought it meant that she was finally going to live with us. So we're getting a hospice bed ordered and all of that. My husband had been out of town. He came back in the morning. He went to see her. I went home to get the kids, and we were going to come scoop her up and take her back to our house. About halfway there, I got a call from my husband, and he said, the nurses say that Jess, my mother-in-law, is actively dying. Actively dying? If you know anything about hospice, or you've had someone go through the process, this is a step-by-step process of stopping to eat, drink, breathing, deterioration of the body, sometimes kind of slipping back into consciousness. So this was happening pretty quick. And he said, what do I do? And we're not even in a hospice wing at this point. I said, what you need to do is hold her hand. Guess that was Jin Shin Jyutsu. I hadn't even thought about it, but hold her hand. Stay with her. Do not leave her side. We will get there as fast as we can. I get a phone call 10 minutes later, and Jess is gone. She took her last breath, exhaled, and she was gone. We were all in a state of shock. But later on, I thought about this so much. What had happened? And what I came to was, with the Jin Shin Jyutsu she had had, with the things she'd done to put the end of her life in place, she was harmonized. And she did not die of cancer. She died because it was time for her. Of course, we were very, very sad to see her go. But she gave me some of my first introduction into Jin Shin Jyutsu, into harmony, and into learning also about myself, because I thought I was in balance. I thought my life was perfect, had everything I needed. I was in, I didn't think about not being in harmony. I'm a busy mother, caregiver, 3 kids, husband, active business people. I laid down on that Jin Shin Jyutsu table for my first session. And you know what I found out? I couldn't breathe. I literally felt like there was a weight on my chest. And now, retrospectively, what I realized was it wasn't the breathing. It wasn't the inhaling. I could not let go. because I was holding so many balls in the air. I was doing so much for so many, and I was not really doing the kind of self-care I needed. So those two experiences really rocked my world and changed everything. And I thought, I don't know what this Jin Shin Jyutsu is, but I'm going to continue to pursue it in sessions from Cheryl, which as I said, I continue to have today. And I started to study. So my first teacher was Judge Schwartz. And I drove to Louisville and I stayed for 5 days there, got a hotel room because I wanted to really be integrated into it. And so I started to take my class. And as you know, if you have taken a class before, the first time you take an in-person class, you're the newbie. So you're the first one on the table, right? So I had sessions with Cheryl, but I hadn't had a session in a classroom setting. So we had all the tables set up and I had my first session there. And now I'm going to tell you kind of a cosmic story because we are filled with those. I had a very, very profound session. I can't remember really physically what happened to me, but I did feel so much energy movement. I remember that. And everyone left the room. I was laying on the table by myself, and I heard this voice. Not my voice, it wasn't here. I'm not sure if it was here, if it was here. It was very loud and booming. And I had heard that voice one time previous, and that was when my mother-in-law was on the table at Cheryl's. And this big booming voice came to me before she had made the decision, and it said, "No more doctors." This time, this big booming voice of whatever it was, my heart, my consciousness, said, "Are you ready?" And I had heard that before in my life, "Are you ready?" And I always went like, "Oh no, not quite yet. I want everything to stay just as it is." And because I knew it was going to cause profound shifts in my life. So this time I said yes. And I could feel my whole body kind of start to shake. And all I can think of it is like something put the brakes on, like, I'd been moving in this direction. And I felt the brakes get put on, and I felt things start to shift. And I thought, okay, this must be me getting ready to move in a different direction. And my life completely changed. And it was not for the faint of heart. But now, in retrospect, it was the best thing that happened to me. And it led me to continue to study Jin Shin Jyutsu, taken lots of classes from lots of our wonderful instructors, still some I have not had the fortunate connection with. But I really do trust this, and I trust this. If you all remember Energy Lock 17 here at the wrist, and see how sometimes you'll have this little bump. And my grandmother, but way before Jin Shin Jyutsu, said, that's your intuition bump. If you've got a bony protrusion on your wrist, that has to do with your intuition. And I had a grandmother who, those things, knew who was coming, knew who was calling, knew that I was having a redheaded baby, my third child. So I trust this, and I trust this. And I do not trust this. So I followed that intuition as I'm going through lots of drama and changes, divorce, bankruptcy, you name it, it was happening. And while I was going through that, I knew I needed to find something meaningful for me to do. And, gosh, it'd be nice to make an income. But what I heard was, go volunteer at the hospital. A lot of Jin Shin Jyutsu practitioners talk about that a lot of, how did you get in there? How did you start? Well, I didn't have a choice. It kept calling to me. So I'd make a phone call. I started at the Markey Cancer Center here in Kentucky because that was a cancer center that my mother-in-law got a little bit of care at. We were mostly in New York. But I'd call them to talk about volunteering. Sometimes somebody would, kind of start something, but then it wouldn't happen. And then I'd hear I'd call again. Until finally, I got a group of women who agreed to meet me. And I was going to tell them what I do and how I think I could be helpful by giving Jin Shin Jyutsu quick sessions chairside in the chemo clinic. So I had the head of palliative care, a woman, I don't know who she was, I can't remember, and another woman who was the head of the chemotherapy clinic, who was a nurse there. And while we have this conversation, she says, I don't quite understand what this is, but I'd like to try it before I say, yes, you can come as a volunteer. So, okay, sure, she came. I had a little office at that point. And so she came to my office, and I had been working there just kind of part-time here and there, thinking one day I could have a practice. But this voice said, go to the hospital. So she came one Saturday, and she had a session. And she had another, like me, one of those life-changing sessions. And she saw a lot in herself that was out of balance. And she got off the table and she physically looked different. And she said to me, I feel completely different. And she talked about feeling about this heaviness lifting off of her. And if you're a practitioner, you know that we're not always privy to what's happening with another person. We hear the pulses, we hear the textures, we watch and observe the body and things moving and shifting and fingers and, maybe tears or the breath. We watch it all. It's talking about the energy. But this just was really amazing. And I didn't feel that at my end. So what she did is she went home and she walked in the door of her house, and her husband and children said, what happened to you? You look so different. They saw a difference. But she called me up and she said, you're in. I don't know what this is, but that was amazing. And that was how I got started. And then she quit her job. She divorced her husband, and she got a completely different line of work in the hospital. So, happened to me and it happened to her. But working at the hospital there was great, and I learned so much. And at the same time, I also volunteered with hospice. Again, I heard that, go to hospice. So I called to volunteer. I went to talk to them. And what I said to them, I explained what I did. And I said, look, why don't you send me to all of those people who are too tender to have massage? Their skin is breaking down or they're in too much pain. And for some reason they said yes. So I started doing that. And then if I had someone there who ended up in the hospital, in the hospice wing, we only had one hospice hospital here in Kentucky, in Lexington, I would follow them in and treat them. And then the doctors would say, wow, because the first one, she got out and went home. And that didn't usually happen. So they started asking me to come, and then I'd get to be a part of the group. And this Wednesday morning, I'd go for 2 hours there, and then I'd go 2 hours at Markey Cancer Center. And they would confer with me and say, we've got this person, they're feeling anxious. We've got this person who's in pain. Will you see them? And that started my relationship with the physicians working together. And people talk about that a lot, about, how do we get the physicians to trust in us and how do we work together? Well, we share what we know and we keep our heart open to listen to their expertise so that we can be the best for everybody. So those two things really got me going. The head of the Markey Cancer Center at one point called me in because he didn't understand what was happening. but what he had heard was the patients were telling the doctors about their experiences and how much better they were feeling. And he was all about patient care. And he said, I just want to understand. So I explained about Jin Shin Jyutsu. I told him what I was doing and how I was doing it. He thought I was giving hand massages. So he was not quite, on par knowing what we were doing there, but that's okay. And then after, he had told me that they had tried an integrated program at the University of Kentucky before. They threw $250,000 at it and it failed. And he talked about the relationships between the doctors and the integrative practitioners. They had Reiki, they had massage, they had acupuncture. And then the patients weren't coming. Why weren't the patients coming? And they were taking space, and the doctors didn't like that because they needed space. So it was a lot of confounders. And he asked me if I might have some thoughts. So what I did was I went home and I thought about it, and he said, just email me some ideas. And I heard this again. And what I heard was, this is an opportunity. So instead of just jotting a couple of notes, I sat down and I wrote him a program for integrative medicine using Jin Shin Jyutsu, because it was really the only thing I knew as the methodology that you'd be using first, and then you might bring other things in, how you'd work with the physicians, how you would connect with the patients, how you would educate and train the staff, monthly self-help classes, handouts, and then I wrote a budget. And in the budget was for the table and, what linens we'd need, everything that I would need to make the practice, and kind of a sample of an intake form and all these kinds of things. And I sent it off to him, just, okay. And I heard nothing. But I thought, well, I did what I heard. And about a month or so later, I got an email from his administrative assistant, and she said, can you send that stuff again? Because Dr. Evers wants to apply for a grant for you. So I found it all, I sent it all again, I felt very encouraged. And we started with a $49,000 grant. And what I failed to mention too is, in that list of things that we needed, I wrote myself a salary. And what I did is I looked and I wrote myself a salary as the head of integrative medicine, because there was nobody else there. So I guess that would be me. And, based it on what I was charging in my private practice and what an integrated professional head would be making. And so I just, put it out there. And so they did hire me. They got all the equipment we needed. And the Lexington Cancer Foundation, it's a fabulous group, were the ones who funded this first year. And what they said was, you have to keep fastidious records, number one. Number two, the Jin Shin Jyutsu must be no charge for any person, any cancer patient, because we were in the cancer area, free for them. Number three, you need to train people outside so they have an understanding, you educate and keep in touch with them. And so I kept very detailed records. I got a form. I had started a form, but I actually got it from Morristown, New Jersey, because Morristown Memorial, why reinvent the wheel? They've been doing this for a long time. So I used their 0 to 10 scale. How do you feel right before a session and how do you feel after? Everyone filled it out. They kept notes, and I would send these to the head of the hospital give them a weekly update. Who I saw, interesting things had happened. He was very enthused, and that helped us keep the grant. So that's kind of the basic story of that. I could probably continue on and on. I hope I haven't gone on and on too much, but I really wanted to lay that out for people because not a special person. Yeah, I'm a good practitioner, but I'm listening to my heart. I'm listening to where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to do. And I have confidence in Jin Shin Jyutsu. And even though a lot of people don't have a full understanding, the people we might be serving or connecting with or trying to connect with, if your heart is open and you feel confident in yourself and you move forward to where you feel you need to be, I just think magical things can happen, because that's exactly what happened to me.
Wow. I was going to say, is there one thing that you would want to communicate to everybody about, your development and where you've come to now? But I think you've said it. I think there's room for a part 2, folks. I mean, I was watching the clock, but I was also really focused on listening to Jennifer's organic growth, really. I don't know about you folks, but it's a very inspiring story of how you can begin in an art, a healing art like Jin Shin Jyutsu, and what it can mushroom into, and in fact what it did. But that key point for me, 17, folks. Real close, is it not, to the heart and the small intestine? Your intuition, your heart, yeah. So really, folks, I don't have much more to say, because Jennifer said it all. But I would love to invite her back to maybe explore a little bit more of her experiences through the hospital in particular, perhaps, and how her growth expanded there and beyond, and what she's doing now, because I know she's doing some other wonderful things with animals.
Oh,
Yes. So there's a lot of information there. So time has moved up. So thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much.
Can I say one quick last thing? And that is that if anybody wants to, have some encouragement or wants to know a little more, I'm happy to share anything and everything I have. I've got a website. It's jbradleyjsj.com. I put things on Instagram about animals and people. But, part of my role, I think, these days is to be encouraging for our whole community, because we are a vast community. And I think of us as a guild. And a guild is, I wrote this down, an association of craftsmen or merchants, often having considerable power. Well, we're not really merchants. We are artisans. We are craftsmen. We do have an art. And we really are in together. So let's be a guild together. And as of that, I want to be supportive to everybody.
Beautiful. So I've put it up there, jbradleyjsj.com.
jbradleyjsj.com. And if you want to email me, it's jennifer@jbradleyjsj.com.
Ah, okay. So Jennifer right. Let's just put that in. Yeah. Jennifer@JSJ Bradley.
No, Jennifer@jbradleyjsj.com.
J Bradley. Okay.
If you go to my website, you'll figure out a way to get in touch with me.
Yeah.
Want to.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you. We could go on, but time has run off a bit. But anyway, I'm really hoping that Jennifer will join us again in the near future. And anybody else, by the way, who has any stories, don't forget, you can always contact me, Terry at JSJ. What am I doing? I'm having one of those days. It's info@jsj.com. I will be here Friday, New Year's Eve, if people were wondering, and we'll round things to some sort of conclusion, because life really keeps moving on. Energy doesn't stop. but we'll bring it to wherever we are then on Friday, the 31st at 2 o'clock New York time. But until then, have a good rest of the day, safe rest of the day, rest of the week. Thank you again, Jennifer. I really look forward to continuing our conversation, both privately and in a webinar at some point, in near point, perhaps in the future. Take care, everybody. We will see you Friday if you join us. Otherwise, I'll see you some other time. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.